Dr. MJ, I am so excited to have a conversation with you this evening. Obviously, Dr. MJ is our friendly terminology for the lovely Dr. Barbara Morris Jensen, who I believe is quite a few hours behind us. So it's an evening for me and morning for you, I believe, Barbara.
Morning for me.
Morning
It's
for you.
about
Well,
10:30 in the morning, I think.
Oh, okay, not too bad then. Not a ridiculously early start for you, but it's very, very dark here and evening. So thank you so much for joining all the way from, I want to say, sunny California. Is it sunny at the moment?
California. It's not sunny though. We're raining, and thank goodness.
Rainy California. Oh, it's
Yes,
actually
yes.
quite sunny here today, so who knew?
Oh, we
Um,
switch places.
we switch places. So I'm excited to have you here today. Obviously, brand mixology is all about mixing things up to create a brand and a life that you actually want. And I can't think of anybody better to exemplify that notion. You have lived and breathed the experiences through your own story, and that you inspire others with, around being true to yourself and doing whatever it takes to kind of meet the things that I guess are in your purpose, which is a big part of what we're going to cover today. But to start with, I'd love to just hear a bit more about your story, which is so fascinating, as to what it is you do today and what it is that led you to have that, and how you found success in your own way.
First of all, I want to say I am so glad we could finally connect, because when I was there in London and there was a problem with the trains, and then we've tried to get online, and so it worked out, and I'm really
It
grateful
feels
to
like
be
there's been
here.
a lot of things, but we
hmm
persevered and we've got here.
And I think that's such a great way to start this, because it is that perseverance of something that you and I both desired to connect on. And so, even through all the little trials and errors, we finally figured out a way. So, I think that's just a great entree into this. When I, review and look back into my life, I believe that all children have such a deep inner knowing when they come onto this beautiful planet, and that through time and circumstances and events, that often we can be detached from that. We can lose our connection with that. And that doesn't mean that everyone knows from the time that they're young what they want to do or what they're going after, but there's this internal sense of being able to follow oneself and to know. And children just have that innate knack ability. It's just that truth and authenticity to them, because they haven't developed this part of the brain yet to be able to analyze and rationalize things. They just live it. They're fully embedded in it. And when I was young, I was very compassionate, and I think most children really are, but it was something that I really felt other people's pain, and I didn't obviously understand it, but I felt it. And as time went on, through a lot of trauma and abuse and things in my life, I had lost that sense of connection with myself, and I had really a lot of numbness that followed me. And so in my earlier years, I was very detached from things that were joyful for me, even though there were stirrings inside of what I felt would make me happy. But when I was 13, my dad actually asked me a question. And he said, "What do you think you want to do? What do you want to be when you're older?" And he asked me more on the doing. I say the being, because that's what often parents say. What do you want to be when you're older? My dad didn't really ask it that way, but that's why I put the slash in there. He asked me what I wanted to do. And I said, I want to be a psychologist. And my dad was in the mental health field. I saw how he helped people, but there was a deep inner knowing that was true for me. It wasn't just because of what I saw, it was something inside that I felt. And by the time I was 16, my brother, who was very educated and older than I am, he asked me, "So where do you want to go to college?" And by 16, between 13 and 16, I really lost this connection just completely. And I said, I'm too stupid to go to college. So all that mindset had burrowed down inside of me through the trauma, the abuse, the bullying, and other things that I had, and poverty, and you name it. It just kind of came along with the whole package in my family. And so the experience of me being connected to myself had just really vanished. I didn't have that spark inside of me anymore. And so I went on, about life rather numbly and didn't have a great deal of insight to be able to make decisions, whether this is best for me or whether it's not best for me, not whether it's best or right or wrong to the world, but for me, whether this choice would benefit me or whether it would serve my higher purpose going out in life. And so I got married 19. I basically, my extent of marriage was, oh, well, we've been together for a couple of years. I guess we should get married. And that was that. What I did know was I really wanted children. I just had such a love in my heart. And so at that point, I had two children and zero regret or anything about that. But I was very unhappy in my marriage for reasons I'll tell you in a moment. But I was really going along numbly and just kind of going through the motions, but again, not a deep connection with myself nor insight. And then my dad died. And I was 26, and my dad was my closest person. He was the one that just helped me on such a higher level to understand myself and my life. And when he passed away, it literally, when you hear a dark night of the soul, that's where I hit. I literally hit the ground on my knees and I prayed to God to die. That's where I was. I was in such a dark place and such a deep depression. And what I've realized since was it was a point of awakening for me. And so what got me up though were I had these two beautiful children who needed breakfast. And so kind of sledging through all these things. And then this awareness came that, oh my goodness, things are so wrong in this marriage. There were just some ways that all of our money had left our bank account and other things, which I won't go into detail because this isn't about him. But I was oblivious to, and it woke me up to all of this. So I knew the only way out was to take the next steps, which meant divorce. And at that time, what happened was we lost our house in foreclosure. I had to file bankruptcy. I had to get rid of the family dog because I couldn't afford to take care of it. And we ended up homeless on a friend's couch. And so I was like bottom of the barrel. I really had no resources that I realized, but the resource that I did have was in here. And so something just kept calling me to that next best step, that next best step. So I got a little job here and slowly I felt this awakening happening deep down inside of me. And I went to my brother as we were clearing out all of my dad's belongings, of which he didn't have many because he was very non-materialist. But what he did have was I have a library full of books from him. And I picked up this psychology book and I went to my brother and in tears I said, I want to be a psychologist. And he said, how old are you going to be in 5 years? And I said, 32. And he said, are you going to be 32 with or without that degree? And that changed everything for me because I thought I could spend 5 more years stuck where I'm at and in this pain and feeling so lost and confused, or I could start taking a step towards something that I knew felt true to me. And when I did that, then things started to unfold. And that wasn't without its challenges, for sure. Just like trying to get on this podcast, those challenges come, but it's that you know that the only way through is by action. And so you keep taking that action. And in the meantime, then my sister passed away in an accident and left behind her 3-year-old daughter. And I adopted her. So now I'm this mom, and we had moved into this tiny 2-bedroom apartment by then. And I barely have enough food on the table. I'm going to school. I'm working part-time, but something just kept pulling me forward. And that was really what launched me.
There's so many things that I want to unpick from what you said, because even if we just start with what you just said, at this point you're a single mom to 2 children of your own. You're still dealing with the death of your own father, the trauma that you had with the breakup of your marriage, homeless, and now you're also dealing with the trauma of the death of your sister and taking a child and adopting a child with her own traumas. And whilst you're doing this, you're still working and you're still somewhere finding it within you to say, I'm going to do the extra thing to pursue the thing that I know I want to do. Where do you find the resources for that? Because I think we can all say, regardless of whether we work for ourselves or in a job, anybody in any walk of life, that we get to this point where we're like, I just don't have anything more in me to even cover the day to day. Where do you find that extra oil in the tank to then be like, I need to follow the path, even if that means that once all the kids have been put to bed and in the tiny space that I've got and the exhaustion that I have, I still find time to pursue my path. How did you do that?
Well, first of all, I want to take it away from logic because that's often where people go to. And that's in my clinical practice. People come in with this logical thought of what they need to do and how they need to organize it and all that. And I think organization is great. Don't get me wrong on that. It's that there is this gentle whisper inside each and every one of us. And when that whisper keeps saying, just one more step, just one more step, it isn't the head telling us. It's not the intelligence of the brain. It's the wisdom of the heart. And it's that deep inner source, however you want to describe it, the universe, God, your higher wisdom, whatever it is, there is a deep whisper that has been with every person from the moment they enter this beautiful planet until the moment that they leave. And that whisper, it became more and more attuned for me. So when I looked around at my logical world, there was nothing I could do. The fear that riddled my body and how am I going to provide for my kids? How are we going to have enough food? But something inside of me just kept nudging me and I was willing to listen to it. And I can't describe it any different than it's that gentle nudge or that little whisper that says, go drink a cup of water or go for a walk or talk to that person. There is just something inside that inherently is always trying to lift us up and move us forward. And I just naturally, I think, had been so aware of that as a child that it had a familiar sense to me, though I didn't logically think about this. Again, my body was so riddled with anxiety and fear of, are we going to be able to eat? What are we going to do? Where are we going to live? And all these things. And so it's almost indiscernible. It's just that little thing in there. And when we have a moment that we connect with it, it just continues to grow. And it doesn't dissolve all the fear and all the depression and all the pain. As a matter of fact, I carried depression, anxiety, and suicidality all the way up into my mid-40s. And I really had a hard time being able to move beyond that, even though these other parts of the world seem to be working out slowly but surely. But they seem to coexist side by side is what I've really come to. That we can have these logical, these human experiences, but deep down inside, nudged right up beside us, is that gentle whisper. And I think if you ask anyone, if time, money, and circumstance wasn't an issue, what would you be doing right now? Or what would you be doing in your career? Or what would you like for your life?
What would you say to somebody, just because those questions I think are so pertinent and they often get asked in therapy or coaching, almost like the magic wand, what would you do, if money was no object and all that? What would you say to somebody who just doesn't know, who maybe has lost the ability to hear those whispers, that, because I guess throughout it all, you still had a very, very faint whisper of this is the next step as you describe it. What would you say to somebody who maybe doesn't have that experience and feels so lost, but isn't connected enough with themselves to know what those next steps should be?
I would ask them at what age they start being happy. Because at the age they stop being happy is the day that they stepped away from that. And when we go back and we find that age that we stopped being happy, we start to see that there's not just one unhappiness that's carried with us, but there was something else beside it. There was something else that coexisted beside it. And so It might be that someone was really good at a sport and then they had to move, or they were told they weren't good and they gave it up. So it isn't that we necessarily take on the thing from when we're a child to forward, but there was a disconnect somewhere. So the
Interesting.
higher level question for me is, where'd the disconnect start? Because when we ask that question, if time, money, and circumstance were no issue, what would you be doing? You know, someone might be saying, I'd be golfing all day. Okay, well, why aren't you? Well, let me tell you all the reasons I'm not. Well, if you start doing that little bit of golfing, and that's that nudge for you, that somehow helps you clear your mind while you're out there swinging a club, or it helps you connect with people, or whatever. We can see that there's these external things that actually try to help lead us inward. But also there's external things that try to block us from that inward path. And that's where we get consumed in things that cause us anxiety or cause us to feel lonely or disconnected. But it's whatever will take you back to that connection of that younger part of you that wasn't disconnected. That's mine.
So it's finding the connection to yourself, even though you may not necessarily. So, for example, speaking to sort of business owners and entrepreneurs that are the listeners, it's not necessarily that the answer will come to you of what should the next right move be for your business or something like that, but it might be that it's saying connect with a part of you that's been lost, that is going to bring you a different state of being, so that that inspires you to get the ideas, as opposed to the actual next step will come. Is
Yes,
what you're saying?
it's
That's an
returning
interesting.
to that place within, even if it were for a moment where everything was okay. Because we get lost in this isn't okay and I need this, and we get so
Need to
outside of
fix, need
ourselves.
to fix.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And so when we turn inward and we find that moment, we find that place and we say, I'm going to help that younger part of me actually fulfill whatever that was. It's a bridge inward so that that child who is very connected to something actually has that experience of being connected again, but with our adult selves. Psychology would call this inner child work. There's so many different ways we could describe this. So it's still going back to that source within, that source that's our light on the inside, that source that nobody else has like you. Everybody has their own experience. And so we go back to find that part that was connected, and we give it what it needs a little bit. And we find the part that's disconnected and we let it sit right up next to each other, rather than what we do is flip flop. We say, I need to be on this side and chase all that, or I need to be sitting on a mountaintop for the next 6 years and go inward. No, it can happen in the moment. It can happen through, I'm going to take 5 minutes for myself today to go inward and just be with myself, to find that younger part of me that feels sad, or that younger part that was so excited to do something. And then to say, what will be the difference that will make all the difference to that younger version of ourselves? And when we do that, it just comes up alongside us and it brings that excitement and inspiration.
How do you know when the voice that's whispering to you is actually your gut, especially if you're not doing something, or when it's actually fear holding you back? Because the two can feel kind of the same. So what's your experience of that, and any advice that you'd give on it?
Well, I think first we have to realize that we do live in two worlds. We live in an inner world and an outer world, or we live in a larger world, or we live in a spiritual world, but they both coexist. And that's really something that I just come back to over and over. They're both there. I had all that tremendous fear, but still there was that nudge. And if it all came so easily, nobody would really pay attention to it, because we don't tend to value things that come easily, unfortunately. When we, though, start to differentiate, it's like trying to tell someone how to be happy. You can't really describe that, or trying to describe what love is like. It's an experience. And when we find it, or it finds us, or we just rediscover it and reconnect with it, then we know the subtlety of it. And so it's really hard to say, oh, this is clearly the difference. I had a ton of fear and yet I felt that nudge. So again, if we go inward and we find that part that says, regardless of what anyone else thinks about this, feels so true to me. And sometimes we start down that path of what we believe to be true to us, only to find out that it wasn't. And I think that is part of the experience is if you feel like it's meant for you and you start pursuing that while checking in with yourself, is this really fulfilling me? Is this truly making me happy? Because I work from people from gang members all the way up to billionaires. And I'll tell you, it's pretty much the same story. It's that it's a disconnection with the self. So you can have the billionaire who's got every resource available to them and is desperately lonely because the fulfillment isn't out there. So it's turning inward again, and it's finding whether it's that younger part of us or whether it's that higher part of us, but it's listening to the body. Like, is this an old repeated pattern that just keeps resurging inside? Or is there like something that's a little tinge of like excitement? Oh my goodness, I'm really excited about this, but right following it is some anxiety or some fear behind it. But something about it kind of lifts me up when I think about it, or it has me feel inspired and want to go after it. And then all the old pattern comes in and says, don't do it because of this or that or the other. You start to see the differences, the nuances in it. And then when you start moving toward this while making reasonable decisions that aren't going to have this come flooding in through the door, the tiniest steps lead us to that next bigger step or that phase or that breakthrough. And what's so important, I think, for people to remember, Claire, is that life is a gift. That's our primary source. It's not what's out there. We have people that disregard their bodies, disregard other people's lives, their own lives. I mean, whatever you want to say on there. And when we really when we tune into the deeper meaning, like, oh my gosh, I am only on this planet for X amount of years. And I'm either going to be spinning up in here of all these things that I need to accumulate out here, or I'm going to tune in here and say, what a valuable gift I have that I'm not paying attention to. That connects us back to that source too. But this gets us out of the way. We use this as the driver in our life when we need to use this. And I don't mean like, we could spin off into codependency and things like that. I mean just following that inspiration of the heart.
So that's interesting, especially that you said that you get that kind of spark of inspiration and then you get the wave of fear, which it is obviously when we do anything new, or all of our instincts start to take us away from doing something that may in any way be out of the comfort zone. And it's important to remember we're biologically designed for that to happen. So is what you're saying, and it's certainly something that I can relate to being familiar with, that we get that twinge of excitement and then maybe the action we take is too big, and so all of the fear senses flood because we've taken maybe too much action. So maybe is it follow that initial inspiration but actually take baby steps so that our nervous system can kind of work with it? Is that sort of
Yes. And I was actually having a conversation with someone this morning, and they said, I really need to change this habit. And I said, as soon as we say that to ourselves, I need to change a habit, everything, pressure, and everything behind says, no, don't do that because I know what to expect with this habit. But when we say, I've got this pattern and I'm just looking to tweak the pattern a little bit. So maybe I'm going to go to bed 10 minutes earlier tonight, rather than I need to get to bed earlier. And this qualification that goes around it. And I need to change that habit and pressure myself into getting to bed earlier, rather than, I know if I got to bed ultimately a half an hour earlier, I'd feel better. So I'm going to start with 10 minutes. I'm just going to put a little chink in that pattern. And then you start building on that one little thing, rather than I need to now go to bed a half an hour earlier, and the brain's going to be, well, this isn't the time I'm used to going to bed, so let's stay up and we'll fiddle or we'll scroll or do whatever. is just this small little step. What pattern? It's way easier to change a pattern than it is a habit, in my opinion.
And actually using the word, because the word habit, we immediately associate habit with something negative, don't we? Even though we have positive habits, but if we say we're going to break a habit, whereas actually breaking a pattern just feels, it's just different
And I don't
language.
even
So
look
I
at
guess
breaking
inwardly we
it.
don't
I just look
resist
at changing it a little bit. Yeah,
adjusting it.
I'm just going to tweak this
Yeah.
pattern just a little bit. And, whether you're a cook or whether you're someone that does social media, right? You just make these little tweaks along the way and you find the thing that works.
So it's, yeah, baby steps. That's really interesting. Something that I wanted to just take us back to from your story that you talked about actually reminded me of a podcast that I listened to earlier this week. Again, the planting you back into when you were in the thick of trauma and from bereavement, from abuse, having your own children, another child, so homeless, watching every penny, and then still following what you wanted to do. A lot of people at that point would burn out, and I know burnout is a word that is being used a lot at the moment, and I'd love to kind of get your take on that specifically. The podcast that I listened to was the Diary of a CEO, and Natalie Dawson was on there. She is a badass, like boss. She's incredible. If you haven't watched it, I would recommend watching that episode. There were some quite controversial points of views on there, which I actually quite liked. And one of them was that she blatantly said, "I don't believe in burnout," which at first I thought, wow, okay, interesting. And she said that her and her business partner, who's a very well-known person in marketing space, don't believe in burnout. And specifically, they say that successful people don't burn out. And what she then went on to say is burnout is off the back of doing, basically, as we know it, taking on too much, doing too much work. But if you're doing what you love, you don't burn out. And that's what takes me right back to your story when you're thrown into the thick of it. Do you feel that the reason that you didn't end up having a breakdown or burning out, and we can maybe get your description of what burnout is and what that feels like, would you agree with that statement, that it's because you were following something that you knew was right for you? Or would you disagree with her statement
Well, I
altogether?
wouldn't say I didn't experience burnout because ultimately I burned out my thyroid. So it was a
Right.
physiological burnout with the amount of stress, fear in the body, the depression. The body has a hard time keeping up. We talk about inflammation out there on the planet. It's not just from foods, it's not just from drinks that we consume, but it's also from thoughts. And the body can't function as best as it needs to. So when you take burnout, if we strictly put it to business, we could talk about that, but I'd like to talk about it in a bigger way. We can get burned
Absolutely.
out emotionally by our childhood. We can get burned out by a relationship that we're not paying attention to whether it's really maybe not a good relationship for us. We can get burned out by many things, a career or whatever, friendships or a hobby or anything, because the emphasis of where we're giving our attention. And so if we have an underlying thing that says, I need to conquer this, I'm going after this, then we create that internal sense of burnout. But again, when we're stepping back and we're looking at the overall meaning of this, what is it that I'm going after this for? Why am I inspired to do this? What value does it bring to me or service to others? Then it takes away that sense of burnout. But along with that, I think we also need to have some type of assessment that's happening while we're moving along to know, am I pushing myself in a direction which really now is not authentic to me? When we're going after and we're chasing something or we're pursuing something for the sake of chasing or pursuing it or getting something back, then that's a self-imposed burnout. And that may be more of what I didn't listen to the podcast, but that may be more of what she was saying is you're putting it upon yourself. And that's what our habits and our patterns do. And so when we burrow down any type of real stressor we have in life, unless it comes down to the basic needs of food and shelter and water, the very basic, those are more self-imposed if it's anything beyond that. We get in these mindsets that we need something and we need to have it a certain way. And so we push. And often the burnout is trying to push the boulder up the hill rather than stopping and saying, okay, what's a more effective approach to this? So there was, a story, I don't recall where it came from, but essentially there's this fisherman and he goes out and he fishes for a couple hours a day. He sells his fish and then he goes home and he takes a little nap and has a cup of coffee with his wife or tea. And then he plays with his children. And then in the evening, he goes out and has fun with his friends. And he's really happy. And his family's really happy. And it's all connected. And then this really smart businessman comes along and says, but if you worked like double the amount of hours, you'd be able to sell more. You'd be able to buy a bigger boat. And he says, well, what for? He said, well, then you can have more boats and you can collect more fish and you can sell more fish. And he says, for what? And he said, so eventually you can hire other people to do this job for you. And he said, for what? And he said, so that you can not work very much, be home with your wife, be home with your children, and have fun with your friends. And it's such a poignant story because what are we chasing? We're out there saying, I'm going to push myself to burnout so I can get this thing. So what? I can collapse and be happy? So again, if we're taking those small little steps and also taking the time to be in our experience, we have doing and we have being, doing and being, doing and being. If we're just going after the doing and we're miserable along the way and burning ourselves out, for what? Why? So that balance again that needs to coexist is, in this human life, we need to go out and do some things. And we need to learn to be, because that's that quiet space where the inspiration comes.
The sort of the doing thing that you were just saying, does that come from beliefs that we adopt, and from at what point does that become the pattern of doing? Is that because we want a certain label or perception of us? Why do we all do that?
Well, I think if we pare it down, society has really been built around the more you have, the better you are. And so societally, we're a success win. And we can all fill in the blank for ourselves with that. But again, if we go back to life is the greatest gift we have here. And that none of the things that we accumulate along the way do we get to keep when we leave. So the quality, the value of life, if we go and we pursue something so that I have food on my table for my family, that's a thumbs up because it leaves me feeling more still and more peaceful on the inside. But if it's I'm going to set my family aside so I can go chase that out there, the kids grow up. And then you turn around and say, wow, why did I do that? I missed all that quality time. So my son that's in college right now, he said, Mom, how come you really haven't ever worked full time? And I said, because I wouldn't miss going to your sporting events, your scouting events. I wouldn't miss being able to sit home and have these experiences. So I would rather have less materially and more richness in here and those memories and those experiences, because the memories are the only thing we get to leave behind.
And experiences is such I think, certainly whenever I've felt stuck and when I've spoken with other people, I think envisaging less of what it is that you tangibly want and thinking more about what you tangibly want to feel and experience is just always going to guide you in the right direction. So more of that. Somebody a while back said something, it was within the leadership context, so it was almost quite a corporate capacity, and I forget what firm it was that he was referring to, but they have an exercise where they get the team to actually think about when they're feeling most passionate and get them to do more of that, and that really put quite a few sort of thought seeds into me of actually not just thinking that in the work context, but looking across, as you were saying earlier, looking across life of when are those moments when you feel the most alive and you can get so much
And
guidance
I
from
think
that.
if you look at the through line, Claire, throughout life, when we go back to that meaning and that inspiration, it's been the thing that's always nudged us forward in a way that we really feel connected to and fulfilled. And that through line is, it's that gentle whisper all along, that if we want to call it that inspiration, that thing that we're doing that causes us to feel inspiration and stay up 2 extra hours so we can get that project done, even knowing we might be a little fatigued the next day, that's that aliveness inside. And very sadly, most of the people I see that come into my office feel very much less than alive. They feel empty, disconnected, they feel alone. And yet the pursuits out here all look like something that people would envy. But what they've lost is that value of, this was really exciting to do. So for me, going through school, it was really challenging to raise 3 kids, and I was very dedicated to going to all their events and sports and things. And that meant we didn't go and do much on the outside. We didn't have extra money to go do that. But the value of being there, it warmed my heart so much. And I wanted to continue to help my children, to love my children, to be with them, and also that inspiration to serve other people as well. And those two together inspired me. And so it had me keep doing more of those things. And granted, going back, I certainly needed more balance. I didn't burn out my thyroid. But it's those learning experiences along the way that I wouldn't do that to myself now the same way. That came out of a fear base. So now I don't live in that fear base anymore. I'm much more a still-based person. And it's that inspiration, though, that when I've talked to people that are very much later on in their years that turn around, that really lived that inspired life that way, they don't have regrets. It's the people that come into me. I had someone that started with me at 81 years old and said, I have been so caught up in this all my life that I really have not been present for my life or had that experience. And before I die, I want to get there. And that's what we worked on, was how to just reconnect in here.
And how wonderful that she was able to see that before it was too late. I had a guest on a couple of weeks ago, and she said nobody on their deathbed ever says their biggest regret is not
Yeah.
making enough money. And I thought, oh, that was such a powerful statement, because the regrets, and I know that they often document people kind of in those last moments, and the biggest regrets tend to be either where they spent their time, who they didn't spend it with, or maybe it's more about the things that they didn't do, the experiences they didn't have, or the things that they held back on. But very few people think, oh, yeah, I wish I'd bought another couple of properties. It tends to not be that. So I'd love to hear your message now to anybody listening to this, that maybe and it will be predominantly business owners, but it may not be, but anybody who maybe is feeling that they're on the wrong path and working day in, day out, and what you would say to them and what action they can
I
take.
would say I would write down on a scale of 1 to 10. This is something that I have people that I work with do. And I actually created a journal on Amazon so that people can have that. But the bottom line is, it's a wheel of life. And on this wheel, there's like 10 different areas. So there's family, there's relationship, there's physical, mental, spiritual, emotional health, all these things, hobbies, career, education. On there, if we look at the center as the hub there, and that's you, and you have this scale of 1 to 10 on each one of these areas. And you go and you make a little hash mark. Where am I financially? Where am I career? Where am I spiritually? All these things. And then you connect those dots. Most times it goes like this. And I ask people in my office, so if you're driving down the road on that wheel, what's the ride going to feel like? It's very uncomfortable. And it's a very bumpy ride, and it just doesn't feel good. Whereas if I said, even if your wheel is this small, but it's balanced, you're going around on a wheel that's smooth. right? And from there, you can expand the whole wheel. So then from there, what people can do is they say, okay, so in this one area, let's say it's financially I'm at a 4, then what would make it a 10? We tend to go, what's wrong? Oh my gosh, this is wrong, that's wrong, that's wrong. And it keeps us feeling stuck. But when we say, okay, what could move it to a 10 via a 5 and a 6 and a 7? Okay, so I could maybe fill out a budget. I could really maybe withdraw getting all those coffees every day or something that would make a difference, and slowly start moving that up. But eventually doing it all the way around the wheel, it's taking those small action steps, but it's something that the answer comes from within. It doesn't come from somewhere else on the outside. So it's a tool to help people actually reconnect within to find out what's important to them so that they can expand that whole wheel, because only each individual knows what meaning there is in each one of those areas. But we tend to look at life at large. Oh my gosh, what do I need to change? We need to break it down. We need to chunk it down enough so that we can make those little micro movements and actually start an expansion that we say, oh, I'm feeling better in my life. Okay, now I'm feeling here. Where do I want to expand in that career? Or do I want to? Maybe I want to channel my energy somewhere else. But if it's in that direction and you have the rest of your life balanced, you feel inspired. You feel good about it. You feel like the success that comes is an inner well of success, not the one where you feel like you go out and trip and fall all over again.
And that's such a different explanation for balance to anything I've heard before, because you're absolutely right. And I've done similar sort of things, but then ends up jaggedy. And then, yeah, if you can actually just think, okay, well, which ones I need to work on to get a smoother ride? That's such a different way of looking at all of the elements of life, and truly thinking about balance, because we tend to think of balance as like work-life balance. That's it. It's like, and even that's a topic in its own right. But this is about actually the balance of all of the
And
areas
let
of
me
life.
add one more thing in there,
I
Claire,
think,
that I really love
yeah.
to offer people. And that is, if we look at spirit, mind, heart, and body, and if those
Mm-hmm.
aren't lined up, we feel off kilter. And so this is kind of a quick assessment of that. In your spiritual world, do you feel a green light like you're cruising? Do you feel that yellow light where you're kind of caution? Or do you feel that red light you are stuck? Mentally, do you feel that green light, yellow light, red light? Emotionally, green, yellow, red. Physically, green, yellow, red. So when you do that and you say, okay, what would move me from a yellow to a green? What would move me from a red to a green? And we start focusing in on those, the answers are already there. I need to get better sleep. I need to drink more water, move my body. All those things we already know. That's the connection in here with that whisper. It's the part that says, here's what you know you need to do to help you move forward. Now, the question is, then do we do it? And that comes down to how much someone is really channeling that meaning of this gift of life, that we are alive and that is the greatest gift that there is. Or are we caught up in this mindset of whatever gobbledygook is going on inside of there? And that's the human
I love that. That's
experience,
so
right? That's the
tangible.
human experience, is to get
Absolutely.
beyond all this, as one of my patients calls it, her shitty committee. It's getting beyond the shitty committee to get down to, no, I'm not willing to live my life that way and squander it. But again, I think when we use these tools, such as looking at that younger part that was left behind, or we look at that, the spirit, mind, heart, and body, these are ways, or that wheel of life, they're ways that we can take small things and not get that challenging subconscious mind to come rushing in the back door and go, don't change anything.
And it all ties in with what you were saying about the baby steps. I'll definitely make sure that we link the link to the resource for that exercise on the show notes, because I think that's super valuable. And that brings us nicely on to the part of the show where I ask my guests to give me two words. And one of the words is, because it's brand mixology, and what I want to do is understand from all of my guests what is that one thing that you want to add to the mix, which goes into the cocktail shaker, of for you what really helps success. And then on the flip side, what is the thing that you would put on ice? So again, what is the one word that you would say, look, this is the thing we need to stop doing, and I'll put that in there on your behalf. So starting with success, what I know
Meaning.
it's hard. There's so many things, but
Meaning.
if there was one thing, meaning. Okay,
No,
didn't take
no.
long for that to come.
It's
Right.
to have that connection with meaning, because otherwise, what really do you accumulate that has that value at the end of life? Meaning is what brings you that. And if you can go out there and offer whatever it is that brings you meaning in service to others, that's often where external success comes from. It's pouring that meaning into
I
there.
love that. And based on what you said, for anybody who perhaps doesn't, often through getting busy and just getting stuff done, we can kind of lose that. So if you wanted to reconnect with that, is that what you were saying earlier? So it's finding those experiences that bring you that extra bit of joy,
And even your
and that's
career,
how
if
you
you're
kind of
in a
find.
career that isn't bringing you meaning, life is too short to continue that. And it might not be go in and quit that today, but it's to evolve toward that thing that has a deeper meaning for you. Because it doesn't leave you alone.
I love
It's
that.
always
I love
whispering
that.
in there.
And actually, I've found in my own experience that even because you're right, you can't just be like, oh, this is the thing that gives me meaning. Reality of life is bills need to be paid. You can't necessarily just quit what you're doing and move on to meaning. But I find that if you integrate little elements of meaning, and that's how I kind of ended up
Yes.
shifting careers many years ago, was I started training in hypnotherapy. And suddenly, actually, the day job, it's not that I ever disliked it, it's just that I felt that it wasn't really giving me anything. I
Mm-hmm.
started to enjoy the day job more because I suddenly had this other thing that was giving me meaning. And so, even if you can just spend a short amount of time doing something that brings you meaning, it can actually help for the stuff that may not feel that meaningful to almost
Yes.
segment it into, well, that's serving a purpose logistically, and I'm
Yes.
getting my meaning somewhere else. So I love that. Meaning is going into the cocktail shaker. What about something you
Opinions.
would put on ice? Oh, I like this one. Okay, elaborate.
When we are listening to the opinions of others, it's great to get guidance and advice when we are asking for it and we actually know how to use it. But if we're simply listening to the opinions, we get so far away from that meaning on the inside. We get so disconnected from that authenticity, because which meaning do you live by? Which meaning can you agree with? They change so often. Person by person, you can get a different opinion and you can feel very lost and stuck. So if you put that on ice and say, the greatest opinion I need is the one from that deeper part of myself, and I need to get quiet enough to listen to that, in whatever practice you take on to do that, it's to listen to that and then find maybe some very trusted individuals, even if you have two or three trusted, that you say, here's either an opinion I have about myself or an opinion I have about something that I want to do. I want to get some feedback on that. That's very different than saying, what should I do? And having someone give you their opinion, or even have someone unsolicited give you advice on what to do. So it's to let go of those opinions, to really find out what feels true to you on the inside, and then find some people to get some feedback from. They might help you evolve it some. But don't listen to the people on the outside.
And I
People are
love what
so
you.
caught up in their own opinions of everything else that nobody has what you need.
Yeah, because an opinion that somebody has might be what's right for them. It's not necessarily what's right for you. And the way that you phrased that question, I thought was really interesting. That obviously there will be some trusted people whose input is valuable, but it's not asking them what should I do, but ask for in your own words, what is I'm perhaps thinking of doing this, what's your feedback on it? So you can then make a decision based on the different viewpoints, but you're not
Right.
deferring
And
the
it's also
decision to someone
trusting
else.
then when they give you
Um,
some feedback, does that feel true to me? Does it feel right to me? And that's going back to that inner nudge again. It's not, is it right? Is it wrong out there in the world? Does this feel right to me? And when we do that, most of us can get through our own BS in our minds to get honest with ourselves. It doesn't mean that immediately we will actually follow that, but it means that we've awoken that part of us inside that says, yes, this is true to you. And then we can feel all that rush of fear behind us go, oh, I can't do that. But ultimately, it's to wake that part up. And then it's to find those small little steps, get that feedback along the way. How might I do this more effectively or efficiently for myself? Get the support that you need around it, and just start expanding that wheel out, because your life is meant to be rich and full, not necessarily with all these things outside, but on the inside.
I absolutely love that so much. Opinions, we're putting it on ice. Putting it on ice. There is so much
Claire,
more
you
that
and
we
I
could
could
talk
talk
about,
for
and
days.
we have done over the years. And you're just one of these people that when we met as part of a program, you just connect with some people, because and we have these weird coincidences sometimes where we get in touch, and we happen to be, we just have the synchronicity that some people have. So it's just incredible to have you here, and I have no doubt you'll be back on the show, and maybe I'll head your way in the next one. We can do it in sunny California. It feels like
That's
a good
right. Hey,
trade-off.
it's always fun to be in person.
Absolutely, absolutely. And as your kind of final sort of parting words and ways of people working with you, I know that obviously you're US based, so you can't necessarily work with everybody across the globe and UK in the same way. But if people want to reach you, find out more about you, obviously you go under the brand Dr. MJ.
Well,
How should
there's
they go
a
about
couple
reaching you? What's
ways,
the best
and
way
I
to get in
do
touch?
have some people that I work with internationally, but it really has all of its framework because I'm a licensed clinical psychologist in California, so I have to follow those laws and regulations. But in terms of if somebody just wants to see what I'm up to content wise, on Instagram, I'm Hey Dr. MJ. That's my website, hey.dr.mj.com. And also, I have a program that's going to be released probably by the end of the year. And this program is a lot of what I have learned throughout my own individual process, and also that I help apply professionally with people that I work with. So it isn't therapy, but it is some teachings, some learnings to help people start getting down to that deeper truth within them, to start breaking through some of these blockades and ways that they have really forgotten that authenticity and that meaning in life. So it's just going to be a continual process that evolves. It's not like a time set process, but something that continually evolves. And along with that, there's an option or opportunity for people to connect with me every other week in a group setting to ask me questions. Because what I realized in my own life was I went to therapy, I read the books, I did the courses, and I still felt really stuck inside. And what I realized was I wish I had someone to ask that question to. Hey, but what about this? And so that's what I wanted to provide, is this platform where people can go through this program and ask me questions, and we can just have a conversation. Because as I said, whether it's working with the person in a gang or the billionaire, we all have a commonality in there. And so these larger conversations can open that up and answer questions for a lot of people, and collectively help us all on our journey.
That is incredible. And I love the connection and the opportunity to be able to reach out to you, not just for your professional expertise, but having heard your story, what you help people with isn't textbook. it comes from lived experiences as well, and I think that counts for so much. So we will definitely make sure that the ways to find you on your website, socials, and also your program and the lovely journal are all linked. And I can't recommend enough how powerful it is working
I'm
with you,
always so
Dr.
grateful
MJ,
for you.
and cannot wait to see you. And we will continue obviously speaking offline as we always do. But thank you so much again for making time. I know you have so much going on in your world.
And
Appreciate you so much being
Claire,
here.
thank
Mwah.
you
Lots of
for
love.
following your own inspiration to open up this podcast, because, you and I have been next to each other for quite some time, and watching you really step into all that authenticity for yourself is very heartwarming. And it's truly my honor to have been on this with you.
You have, and you know as well, probably more than most, how much everything we spoke about today is the journey that I've had to step into, and this has been something I wanted to do for a long time. And we can find all of the excuses about the right timings, and there comes a point where you just have to listen and just say, logic, throw it out the window.
And once you make that leap, you never go
So
back.
yeah, you never go back. You never go back. So yeah, you've been an immense part of that. So thank you. And yeah, I can't wait to speak to you soon. I have no doubt you'll be back as a guest. And yeah, we'll put everything on the
Thanks,
notes for
Claire.
everybody to
I
go and to reach
appreciate
out.
you.
Speak soon. Bye. If you enjoyed this episode, I would love it if you'd subscribe and share it with somebody who's building things their own way too. This show exists to challenge the default path, to mix things up and create a brand, a business, and a life we actually want. Thanks for listening. See you next time.